There's a certain kind of quiet that only exists far from everything, high up where the roads twist like tormented snakes through rock and shadow. Mountain passes. They cut through landscapes both beautiful and brutal, arteries carved into the flesh of the earth. By day, they might offer breathtaking views, a challenge for the determined driver. But when night falls, that's different. Entirely different. The darkness up there isn't just the absence of light, it feels thicker, heavier. It presses in, muffling the world outside the lonely beam of your headlights, swallowing sound until your own heartbeat sounds too loud in the sudden hush between gusts of wind. And the isolation. God, the isolation. Miles from the nearest town, cell service a forgotten dream. Just you, your engine's drone, and the vast, indifferent wilderness stretching away into the ink-black sky. It's easy to feel small up there. Vulnerable. Every shadow seems to writhe with unseen life. A single wrong turn on a hairpin bend shrouded in sudden fog, a patch of black ice slicking the pavement, an engine sputtering its last breath miles from anywhere. These aren't just possibilities, they're the whispered anxieties that ride shotgun with every traveler who dares these heights after sunset. Help is a long way off, if it comes at all. That knowledge settles deep in your bones, a primal awareness of being utterly alone, a tiny spark of warmth and life adrift in an overwhelming emptiness. Is it any wonder, then, that these places breed stories? Fear is a powerful catalyst, isn't it? It sharpens some senses while dulling others. Local legends cling to these mountain roads like the stubborn mist in the valleys below. Ghost stories, born from real tragedies perhaps, or maybe just from the way the wind howls through the crags like a mournful cry. Was that really just the wind, or a whispered name carried on the breeze? Was that distant light another vehicle, or something else? When you're isolated, when the shadows play tricks on your eyes and every snap of a twig sounds like a footstep, the mind starts working. It fills the silence. It populates the darkness. Accidents leave scars on the land, echoes of shattered lives that resonate in the quiet hours. Disappearances leave questions hanging heavy in the air. These tragic fragments become the seeds from which local legends sprout, nurtured by darkness and solitude. The veil between worlds feels whisper-thin in such places, where the raw power of nature meets the sharp edge of human fear. It's fertile ground for the uncanny, for tales of things that linger long after they should be gone. Supernatural encounters become more than just campfire tales, they feel like a genuine possibility lurking just beyond the reach of your headlights. This collection delves into that chilling intersection of desolate geography and lingering spirits. We journey onto those haunted passes, exploring the eerie atmosphere that permeates the air long after the sun has dipped below the jagged peaks. Prepare for encounters that defy easy explanation, spectral figures cloaked in mist appearing suddenly on the roadside, their eyes holding ancient sorrow or chilling emptiness, their intentions forever unknown, forgotten structures promising shelter but harboring something ancient, watchful, and resentful within their decaying walls, phantom vehicles forever replaying their final, tragic journeys, driven by unseen hands towards destinations they will never reach. These are more than just chilling tales, they are echoes of fear, loss, and the unsettling question of what truly happens when the road ends and the deep night begins. The psychological weight of these environments is undeniable, warping perception, turning mundane sounds into portents of doom. The experience can leave an indelible mark, a creeping paranoia that follows you back into the mundane world, a sense that you glimpsed something forbidden and are now noticed. What terrors are born from solitude and suggestion, and what might actually be waiting in the oppressive dark? These remote stretches of road hold many secrets, some woven from tragedy, like the tale whispered along the treacherous inclines of Serpent's Coil Pass. These remote stretches of road hold many secrets, some woven from tragedy, like the tale whispered along the treacherous inclines of Serpent's Coil Pass. Kai knew Serpent's Coil Pass like the back of his calloused hand. Or at least, he thought he did. Years he'd spent wrestling his 18-wheeler up and down its unforgiving curves, hauling goods between the sweltering coast and the cooler highlands. Tonight, though, felt different. He was pushing hard, chasing a deadline, the fatigue a heavy cloak settled over his shoulders, pressing down, making his eyelids feel like lead weights. Black coffee and loud music only did so much against the hypnotic drone of the diesel engine and the endless ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the oppressive darkness ahead. It was late. Past midnight. The air outside the cab was thick with the damp chill that always clung to these heights, even in warmer seasons. Then came the fog. Not gradually, but like a shroud suddenly dropped over the mountains. One moment, Kai could see the pale, skeletal fingers of moonlight on the distant peaks. The next, his world shrank to the trembling circle cast by his high beams, cutting weakly into a wall of swirling white. Visibility dropped to near zero. Dangerous. He slowed the lumbering truck, knuckles white on the steering wheel, senses straining against the unnatural silence that descended with the mist. The usual night sounds, the screech of unseen creatures, the rustle of wind through unseen trees, were smothered. All that remained was the growl of his engine and the rhythmic thump of the wipers clearing arcs on the windscreen, revealing nothing but more fog. It felt like driving through limbo. It was in this disorienting soup that he saw her. A flicker at the edge of his vision, resolved into a shape. A figure. Standing unnervingly still on the narrow shoulder, just inches from the sheer drop into the gorge below. A girl? Kai's foot slammed the brake instinctively, the air brakes hissing in protest, the heavy truck groaning. His heart hammered against his ribs, a cocktail of surprise and instant, inexplicable dread. Who the hell would be out here, on foot, at this hour, in this weather? It made no sense. None. As the truck shuddered to a halt, the figure approached, drifting out of the mist like an apparition. She was a girl, young, maybe early 20s. Dressed in a simple, pure white shirt that seemed almost luminous against the gloom. Her dark hair clung damply to her face and shoulders. She stopped beside his door, looking up at him. Her eyes, large and dark, seemed to sparkle with an odd intensity, yet her face was disturbingly pale, almost translucent in the harsh glare of the cabin light. Porcelain smooth, but utterly devoid of warmth. She didn't speak immediately, just looked at him with those unnerving eyes. Kai, recovering slightly, rolled down his window, the damp, cold air rushing in. "Are you all right, miss? What are you doing out here?" Her voice, when it came, was soft. Eerily soft, like dry leaves rustling or wind sighing through a cracked window pane. "Brother," she began, using the familiar, respectful term, "can you give me a ride? Please? I need to get home. To visit my mother. It's urgent." Urgent? At this hour? On Serpent's Coil? Kai felt a fresh wave of unease wash over his fatigue. Every instinct screamed at him. Drive away. Now. But she looked so fragile. So lost. And the urgency in her voice, though quiet, felt strangely compelling, desperate almost. His conscience warred with his fear. Leaving her here felt unthinkable. What if she fell? What if another vehicle, blinded by the fog, didn't see her? Damn it. Against his better judgment, fueled by exhaustion and a stubborn sense of duty, he nodded curtly. Get in. She opened the passenger door and climbed into the cab, settling into the seat beside him with a strange, weightless grace. She didn't slam the door, it closed with a soft click that was barely audible over the idling engine. She offered no thanks, just turned her head to stare out the passenger window, her gaze fixed intently on the swirling white void outside. The silence in the cab instantly felt heavier, charged with unspoken tension. An unnatural chill began to seep into the air, colder than the outside fog could account for. Kai could feel the hairs on his arms prickle. He put the truck back in gear, the engine revving as they pulled slowly away. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Kai, needing to break it, needing something normal, cleared his throat. "Visiting your mother this late?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Does she live near here?" The girl didn't turn. Her gaze remained fixed on the fog-drenched emptiness outside. After a long pause, she replied in that same soft, whispery voice, "Yes. Nearby. In the house just off the pass. My mother, she lives alone now. I don't want her to be lonely." Something about her words, the way she said "lives alone now," sent a jolt of ice down Kai's spine. It wasn't just the statement itself, but the profound, chilling melancholy that underscored it. He glanced instinctively at the passenger mirror, trying to see her reflection, but the angle was wrong, or maybe the light was too dim. He could only see the vague outline of her head against the window. He tried again. Dangerous time to be traveling this pass, especially on foot. Anything could happen. She finally turned her head slightly towards him, though her eyes didn't quite meet his. They seemed focused somewhere past his shoulder, dark pools reflecting the dim dashboard lights. "My name is Lean," she breathed, the sound barely audible. "A few years ago. I was coming to visit my mother. One night. Much like tonight." Her voice trailed off for a moment, then returned, flat and devoid of inflection. "There was an accident. Right up here. At the sharpest bend." Kai's blood ran cold. The sharpest bend. Devil's Elbow, they called it. Notorious for accidents. He'd heard stories. Whispers among other drivers about strange sightings near there. His heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against his ribs. His mouth went dry. This wasn't right. This wasn't real. His logical mind screamed denial, even as primal fear gripped him. He didn't dare look directly at her now. He kept his eyes glued to the treacherous road ahead, the fog seeming to thicken even further, pressing in, suffocating him. He gripped the wheel tighter, his breath shallow. They were approaching Devil's Elbow. He knew it by the feel of the road, the way it started to twist more violently. He could almost smell the danger in the air, a metallic tang mixed with the damp earth. He risked a quick glance to his right. The seat was empty. Lean was gone. Vanished as completely and silently as she had appeared. There was no sound of the door opening or closing, nothing. Just emptiness where she had been moments before. The chill in the cab intensified, biting deep into his skin. The truck rolled onward into the blind curve, the engine noise subtly deafening in the horrifying silence left by her absence. Kai could hear his own ragged breathing, the frantic thumping of his own heart. Sweat beaded on his forehead, trickling cold down his temples despite the unnatural chill. Then he felt it. An icy pressure on his right shoulder. Like a hand. Unseen, unfelt in any physical sense, yet undeniably there. Cold. Heavy. Possessive. He gasped, a choke sound strangled in his throat. And a voice whispered, directly behind his ear, soft as falling snow, cold as the grave. Lean's voice. On, do you see my mother waiting?" Panic, absolute and overwhelming, seized him. His hands flew off the wheel as if burned. His foot stomped blindly, hitting the brake pedal with full force. The massive truck, already navigating the treacherous curve, protested with a shriek of tortured metal and rubber. Tires lost traction on the slick, foggy asphalt. The world outside the windshield tilted violently as the truck slid, back-end fishtailing towards the precipice. Kai screamed, a raw, terrified sound torn from his lungs. His heart felt like it stopped. Time seemed to freeze in a horrifying tableau of spinning fog and impending doom before darkness claimed him. When the first rays of dawn pierced the dissipating fog the next morning, other travelers found Kai's truck. It hadn't gone over the edge, miraculously. It sat skewed across the road, nose crumpled against the rock face at Devil's Elbow. Kai was still in the driver's seat. Alive, physically unharmed, but his eyes were wide, staring, utterly vacant. His body was rigid, stiff as stone. And he was muttering, over and over again, the same two words, a broken mantra whispered on trembling lips, "My mother, my mother." He never fully recovered. Back in the nearest village, the story spread like wildfire. The elders nodded grimly. They knew the legend. The story of Lean, the young woman killed in a crash at Devil's Elbow years ago, desperately trying to reach her ailing mother. A mother who, consumed by grief, had withered and passed away not long after, leaving their small house near the pass abandoned, slowly surrendering to the relentless creep of the wild forest. But Lean's spirit, they said, forever bound by unresolved attachment and the trauma of her final moments, still lingered. Still waited on foggy nights along Serpent's Coil Pass, forever seeking a ride, forever trying to complete that final, tragic journey home. Kai never drove Serpent's Coil Pass at night again, forever haunted by the memory of the girl seeking a ride home from beyond the grave. While some spirits wander the open road seeking passage, others lie in wait within forgotten structures, turning places of refuge into inescapable traps, as a group of young explorers discovered at the infamous Watcher's house. Kai never drove Serpent's Coil past at night again, forever haunted by the memory of the girl seeking a ride home from beyond the grave. While some spirits wander the open road seeking passage, others lie in wait within forgotten structures, turning places of refuge into inescapable traps, as a group of young explorers discovered at the infamous Watcher's house. They called themselves urban explorers, though mostly they were just bored college kids chasing thrills. Sun, the self-appointed leader, always pushing the limits, Mai, quiet but observant, with a nerve that often surprised the others, maybe even herself, Trang, perpetually anxious, easily spooked but fiercely loyal, and Bao, the pragmatist, always trying to find a rational explanation, the reluctant anchor to Sun's impulsive energy. There was an unspoken history between Sun and Mai, a fizzle of something that had never quite caught fire, adding a subtle undercurrent to their interactions. Tonight, their target was echoing Gorge Pass, notorious not just for its treacherous curves but for the whispers of forgotten places hidden just beyond the tree-line. Places best left undisturbed. They'd planned it meticulously, ascend halfway before dusk, set up a viewpoint, maybe camp if the weather held. But the mountains had other ideas. One moment, the sky was bruised twilight, the next, it tore open. Rain didn't just fall, it hammered down in blinding sheets. Thunder cracked overhead, the sound bouncing violently off the unseen canyon walls, the echo that gave the gorge its name. Wind howled like a banshee, whipping the trees into a frenzy. Driving became impossible, suicidal. We need to find shelter. Now. Sun yelled over the din, wrestling with the wheel of his beat-up SUV. Where? Trang cried, her voice tight with panic, peering frantically into the maelstrom outside. It was Mai who spotted it first, a darker shape looming through the driving rain off to the side of the narrow road. There. Look. Barely visible, set back from the road and half swallowed by overgrown vegetation, stood a house. Old. Dilapidated. 2 stories, maybe, with gaping holes where windows should be and a sagging roofline that gave it the look of a weary, slumped beast. Even through the storm, it radiated an aura of profound neglect and something else. Something watchful. The Watcher's house, Bao murmured, recalling a half-forgotten local tale his grandmother used to scare him with. Supposedly haunted. Bad luck. Luckier than getting washed off this damn cliff. Sun retorted, already turning the wheel sharply towards the muddy track leading to the structure. It's just an old empty house. Come on. Hesitantly, they pile out, battling the wind and rain, flashlights cutting weak beams through the deluge. The air that hit them as Sun forced open the groaning front door was colder than the storm outside, thick with the cloying stench of mildew, rot, and something vaguely metallic, like old blood. Dust lay thick as velvet over everything inside, crumbling furniture draped in ghostly white sheets, cobwebs intricate as macabre lace hanging from the rafters. The silence, once they were inside and the door slammed shut behind them with a bang that made them all jump, was somehow worse than the storm's fury. It pressed in, heavy and expectant. They huddled together in the main room, their flashlights creating a small island of light in the oppressive darkness. Trang was already trembling, clutching Mai's arm. I don't like this place, Sun. It feels wrong. It's just an old house, Trang. Drafty, Bao said, though his voice lacked conviction as he swept his flashlight beam across peeling wallpaper that seemed to depict distorted, leering faces. Probably rats, maybe squatters. No squatters have been here in decades, Mai said softly, her gaze fixed on a dark stain spreading across the floorboards in a far corner. Look at the dust. It was then that Sun heard it. Faint at first, barely audible over the wind still rattling the broken window panes. A sound like crying? Soft, choked sobs, filled with an aching, inconsolable grief. Did you guys hear that? Trang whimpered, burying her face in Mai's shoulder. Bao froze, listening intently. Hear what? It's the wind. No, Mai whispered, her eyes wide, fixed on the dark corner with the stain. It's not the wind. The sobbing grew louder, clearer now, undeniably human yet infused with an inhuman chill. It seemed to emanate from that darkened corner. Against Bao's muttered protests, Mai, driven by a morbid curiosity that felt disturbingly like recognition, slowly raised her flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom towards the source of the sound. The light landed on a shape huddled there. A figure. A young girl, or what looked like one, with long, tangled black hair completely obscuring her face. She wore a simple, pale dress, now stained and torn. Her shoulders hitched with silent sobs, but then, as the light touched her, she slowly lifted her head. There was no face beneath the hair. Only shadow. Deep, empty, soul-crushing shadow. But from within that darkness, two eyes suddenly gleamed, not reflecting the flashlight beam, but emitting their own cold, hateful light. The air temperature plummeted. The sobbing stopped, replaced by a low, guttural whisper that seemed to crawl under their skin. "Why did you come here?" No one could move. Terror, stark and absolute, rooted them to the spot. The figure, the weeping shadow, a name that sprang unbidden into Bao's horrified mind, began to rise, unfolding with unnatural slowness. "This is My place." With a deafening crack, the main door, which Sun had wedged shut against the storm, slammed violently open, then shut again, the heavy bolt sliding home with a sound like a prison cell locking. The flashlights flickered wildly, casting frantic, dancing shadows, before dying one by one, plunging them into absolute, suffocating darkness. Panic erupted. Sun yelled, stumbling backward. Trang screamed, a high-pitched shriek of pure terror. Something cold and intangible brushed past Bao's cheek. He felt a hand, icy and skeletal, grip his shoulder, hard. He cried out, lashing blindly into the dark. "Stay!" The whisper was everywhere now, inside their heads, slithering through the darkness. It was the girl's voice, filled with centuries of pain and malice. "I've waited so long." Mai suddenly gasped, a choked, strangled sound. I can't move." Her voice was thin with terror. "Something's holding me." "Sun." "Bao." "Mai." Sun lunged towards where he thought she was, his hands grabbing only empty, freezing air. "It wants you," the voice hissed, laced with a cruel amusement. "You feel it too, don't you? The connection? You'll take my place. You will stay, forever." A horrifying realization dawned on Bao, fragments of his grandmother's warnings flashing back. The Watcher's house. The girl murdered by a jealous lover, or was it something else? Something tied to the land, to bloodlines? The ghost wasn't just seeking revenge, it needed a replacement. An anchor. And it had chosen Mai. "No!" Bao roared, finding his courage in desperation. He grabbed blindly, found Mai's arm, felt Sun doing the same. "We're getting out of here. Now!" They pulled, dragging Mai, who felt impossibly heavy, as if rooted to the floor by invisible chains. Behind them, the whispering dissolved into high-pitched, furious shrieking. The house itself seemed to groan around them, the very air vibrating with malevolence. They stumbled towards the door, fumbling with the bolt in the pitch blackness, the shrieking echoing in their ears. Finally, the bolt slid back. They burst out into the raging storm, half carrying, half dragging Mai, running blindly down the muddy track towards the road, towards the relative safety of their car, not daring to look back at the dark, silent house that seemed to watch them go with cold, possessive eyes. They didn't stop driving until they hit the outskirts of the nearest town, the first glimmers of dawn painting the sky a bruised purple. The storm had passed as quickly as it had arrived. Relief washed over them, so potent it was nauseating. But the horror lingered. Especially for Mai. The nightmares started that very night. The weeping shadow, the cold grip, the whispering voice promising eternal solitude. She woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Sun and Bao tried to rationalize it, stress, trauma, exhaustion. But then Sun called Mai a few nights later, his voice tight with fear. He was having the dreams too. Feeling watched. Hearing whispers when no one was there. Trang was a wreck, barely sleeping, jumping at every noise. A quick, terrified call confirmed Bao was experiencing it too. The house hadn't let them go. They met, huddled in a brightly lit city cafe that felt worlds away from echoing Gorge Pass, their faces pale and drawn. Fear was a constant companion now. We have to go back, Bao said finally, voicing the thought they'd all secretly dreaded. We have to figure out what it wants, or it will never leave us alone. The return journey was thick with apprehension. The past seemed even more menacing under the clear night sky, the silence profound, watchful. The house stood as they'd left it, perhaps even more dilapidated, radiating a palpable aura of dread. Steeling themselves, they pushed open the door. The same cold, musty air greeted them. And then, the sobbing began again, emanating from the dark corner. We just want to know what you need. Mai called out, her voice trembling but firm, stepping forward despite Sun's restraining hand. We didn't mean to disturb you. Can we help you find peace? A hazy, white mist coalesced in the corner, slowly taking the form of the girl, the weeping shadow. Her face, clearer now, was etched with timeless sorrow and burning resentment. Her eyes fixed on Mai. Peace? There is no peace. Not until someone takes my place. This house, this land, demands a soul. She gestured vaguely around the decaying room. My killer bound me here. His bloodline tainted this ground. Only one of similar blood can release me, by taking my burden. The twist landed like a physical blow. Mai stumbled back, gasping, understanding dawning in her eyes. Her family history, a distant ancestor accused of some dark deed generations ago near this very pass, it wasn't just random. The ghost had chosen her for a reason. No! Sun yelled, stepping in front of Mai. There has to be another way. We won't let you take her. The ghost let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. There is no other way. One stays. Or all stay. The shadows in the room deepened, swirling, coalescing. The pressure became immense, suffocating. Invisible forces pressed in on them. Trang screamed as she felt icy fingers close around her ankle. Sun fought against an unseen weight pushing him down. Run! Bao yelled, shoving Mai towards the door. Get out! Go! He turned back, intending to follow, to fight, but stopped dead. Sun and Trang stood frozen, their eyes wide and blank, vacant. Like dolls. A faint, shadowy mist seemed to cling to them. Mai was still struggling, but slower now, her eyes beginning to glaze over, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek as she looked back at him, a look of utter despair. The weeping shadow smiled, a terrifying, triumphant rictus. Bao fled. He ran from the house, from the pass, from the silent screams of his friends trapped in that timeless, soul-stealing prison. He never saw them again. The Watcher's house eventually collapsed, or perhaps simply vanished, swallowed by the forest and the fog, taking its victims with it. Bao lived, but his survival was its own kind of damnation, forever tormented by guilt and the echoing whispers from Echoing Gorge Pass. They said he went back years later, drawn by an irresistible pull, seeking answers, or perhaps an end to his torment. His abandoned car was found by the side of the road near the overgrown track leading to where the house once stood. Bao himself was never seen again. The Watcher's house stood empty once more, or perhaps not entirely empty, its dark secrets swallowed by the pass, a chilling reminder that some spirits never rest. Escaping a haunted place might save one's life, but some encounters involve entire spectral collectives bound to their tragic fate, like the phantom passengers aboard the spectral journey known as the Last Ferry. The Watcher's house stood empty once more, or perhaps not entirely empty, its dark secrets swallowed by the pass, a chilling reminder that some spirits never rest. Escaping a haunted place might save one's life, but some encounters involve entire spectral collectives bound to their tragic fate, like the phantom passengers aboard the spectral journey known as the Last Ferry. Duc considered himself a practical man. 20 years driving rigs through every kind of landscape, every kind of weather, had sanded away any romantic notions about the open road. He'd heard all the stories, of course. Every truck stop, every greasy spoon diner buzzed with them, phantom hitchhikers, weird lights, roads that vanished only to reappear miles away. He'd always laughed them off. Boredom, fatigue, too much cheap coffee, that's what caused ghost stories, not actual ghosts. Especially the tales about Shadow Creek Road. A particular stretch cutting through dense, old-growth forest, infamous for the legend of a ghost bus that supposedly reenacted its final, fatal journey on moonless nights. Utter nonsense, Duke thought, just spooky folklore to scare rookie drivers. Tonight, however, was different. He was running late, pushing his truck through Shadow Creek Road well after midnight. The forest pressed close on either side, ancient trees forming a near-solid wall that swallowed his headlights. The usual symphony of the night, insects, frogs, the distant call of an owl, was eerily absent. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the steady thrum of his engine. An unnatural chill, unrelated to the night air, seeped into his cab, raising goosebumps on his arms despite the heater humming. He fiddled with the radio, getting nothing but crackling static across every station. Probably just the thick trees interfering with the signal, he told himself, trying to shake off a growing sense of unease. Fatigue. That's all it was. He passed the weathered, moss-covered sign marking the supposed location of the accident, a landslide that had buried a full bus years ago, killing everyone aboard instantly. A grim spot, even without the ghost stories. As he rounded the next bend, his headlights snagged on something up ahead. Something large, metallic, and decidedly out of place. A bus. Stopped, dead center in the narrow lane, completely blocking his path. Duke swore under his breath, easing his foot onto the brake. What idiot parks a bus in the middle of the road out here? As he got closer, the unease solidified into something colder. This wasn't just any bus. It was old. Ancient, really. Covered in rust and grime, windows cracked, dents marring its faded paintwork. Its headlights glowed with a weak, flickering, sickly yellow light, like dying embers. It looked like something dragged from a scrapyard, yet, it was here. He squinted, trying to make out the license plate through the dirt, and a shock went through him. He recognized the faded numbers, the old style, it matched the descriptions from the legend. The bus from the accident. His heart hammered. This had to be a prank. Some elaborate setup by local kids? But the sheer presence of the thing felt wrong. Deeply wrong. The air grew colder still. He stopped his truck a respectful distance away, engine idling, trying to get his bearings. That's when he saw the driver. A silhouette in the cockpit, face turned towards him. Pale. Impossibly pale, with eyes like dark, empty sockets staring straight through the grimy windshield, right at Duke. There was no life in those eyes, but he felt an almost physical weight of sorrow and, was that hatred? Emanating from the figure. Before Duke could react, before he could even honk his horn, the pneumatic doors of the old bus hissed open with a sound like a dying breath. And people started getting off. One by one. Passengers. Men, women, a few children, all dressed in clothes that seemed slightly out of date. Their faces shared the same deathly pallor as the driver, their eyes blank and vacant. They didn't walk, they shuffled, trudged out into the middle of the lonely road, forming a silent, spectral crowd between the ghost bus and Duke's truck. They turned, slowly, unnaturally, to face him. An army of the dead, blocking his way. Duke's breath hitched. He fumbled for the door lock, heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He felt utterly exposed, pinned in his headlight's glare. The figures began to move towards him, slowly, deliberately, their feet making no sound on the asphalt. The silence was absolute, terrifying. He could feel the cold they brought with them, a tangible wave of graveyard chill washing over his truck. Then, a soft tapping sound at his driver's side window made him jump violently. A young girl stood there, right beside his cab. She looked barely out of her teens, her face as pale as mist, framed by dark, damp hair. Her eyes, unlike the others, weren't empty, they were filled with a profound, heartbreaking sadness. She spoke, her voice as soft and mournful as the wind he couldn't hear. "Can you take us home, sir?" She whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "Please?" "We were on our way home. We're still waiting." The request, so simple, so mundane, yet delivered by the spectral figure amidst a crowd of the dead, shattered Duke's remaining composure. A strangled scream tore from his throat. He slammed his palm onto the gearshift, crashing it into reverse, then forward again, wrenching the steering wheel hard. He floored the accelerator. The truck roared, tires squealing as he swerved violently onto the narrow shoulder, bumping past the front of the ghostly bus, narrowly avoiding the silent figures who didn't flinch, didn't react, just watched him with those dead eyes. He didn't look back. Not directly. But in the split-second frantic glance he risked in his rearview mirror, he saw it. The ancient bus still stood there, its sickly lights pulsing faintly in the darkness. The spectral passengers were still gathered on the road, motionless silhouettes against the night, watching him flee. He drove like a man possessed, pushing the truck faster than was safe on the winding road, not daring to slow down until the first welcome lights of a highway rest stop appeared miles later. He stumbled out of his cab, shaking, gasping for air. He tried to tell a couple of other truckers what he'd seen, babbling about a ghost bus, pale figures, a girl at his window. They exchanged pitying glances, muttering about long hours and road fatigue. Crazy. He must be crazy. Until one of them walked around to the passenger side of Duke's rig and stopped dead. Hey! Duke, what the hell is this? Duke followed his gaze. His truck was coated in the usual road grime and dust from the forest passage. But clearly visible, pressed into that layer of dust all along the passenger side, were dozens of faint, unmistakable handprints. Small handprints, large handprints, as if scores of desperate, unseen hands had tried to cling to his truck as he sped away. The sighting, the handprints, the lingering chill, it broke Duke's skepticism completely. But the encounter wasn't over. It followed him home. Nightmares plagued his sleep, the rusting bus blocking his path, the pale faces, the sad-eyed girl whispering her plea. Even awake, he felt a constant, oppressive weight of sorrow around him, heard whispers just on the edge of hearing, felt unseen eyes watching him. He lost weight, his nerves frayed, his work suffered. He was becoming a ghost himself. Finally, desperate, he sought out elder men, a wiry old man who lived in a village tucked away near the foothills, a man rumored to understand the world beyond the veil. Duke, feeling foolish but terrified, recounted his experience. Elder Min listened patiently, his eyes sharp and knowing. When Duke finished, the old man nodded slowly. "You have disturbed the wronged souls of the last Ferry," he said, his voice quiet but resonant. "They perished together, their journey unfinished. Their spirits are bound to that place, to the wreckage, and to their shared fate. They reach out, desperate for release, perhaps angry at the living who pass freely. The driver, his guilt likely anchors them strongest." Elder Min explained that only a proper prayer ceremony, performed at the site of the crash with sincere intent, could potentially appease the spirits and allow them to move on. It meant returning to Shadow Creek Road. At night. To face the source of his terror. Duke felt sick with fear, but the alternative, a life haunted by spectral passengers, was worse. Armed with offerings of fruit, incense, and paper money, and reciting the prayers Elder Min had taught him, Duke drove back into the maw of Shadow Creek Road. The forest felt even darker, the silence even heavier than before. As he approached the crash site, a steep embankment where twisted, rusting metal shards were still rumored to lie hidden beneath decades of undergrowth, the air grew bitingly cold. He stopped the truck, got out, his legs trembling. As he laid out the offerings on a flat rock and lit the incense, hazy figures began to coalesce in the mist drifting between the trees. The passengers. Silent. Watching. Their pale faces seemed less empty now, more filled with a palpable pain and longing. Duke began to pray, his voice shaking at first, then growing stronger as he focused on his plea for their forgiveness, their release, their peace. As the smoke from the incense curled into the cold night air, a strange dizziness overcame him. The forest blurred, shifted. He wasn't just at the crash site, he was witnessing the crash. He saw the old bus, packed with tired people heading home. He saw the young girl with the sad eyes, clutching a university diploma. He saw an old couple holding hands. He saw the driver, his face etched with fatigue and stress, arguing with someone on a crackling radio, ignoring a shouted warning about the unstable slope ahead after days of heavy rain. He saw the driver make the fatal decision to keep going, to make up for lost time. Then, the sickening roar as the mountainside gave way, the terrifying, brief chaos inside the bus, the crushing weight, the abrupt, final silence. The vision cleared, leaving Duke gasping, tears streaming down his face. And standing before him, slightly apart from the other spectral forms, was a new figure. The driver. His ghostly face was a mask of unbearable remorse and terror. He didn't speak, but Duke felt his plea bombard his mind. Forgive me. Help them. My fault. Help me make it right. Understanding and a profound wave of empathy washed over Duke. He wasn't just dealing with victims, he was dealing with a perpetrator trapped by his own catastrophic failure. He turned his prayers now to include the driver, begging forgiveness for his mistake, asking that he too be allowed to move on, to release his passengers from the prison of his guilt. He prayed with all his heart, pouring his own fear and newfound empathy into the words. Slowly, tentatively at first, then with growing intensity, a soft, warm light began to glow from within the trees, pushing back the oppressive darkness. The spectral passengers turned towards it, their pale faces losing their tormented expressions, replaced by looks of dawning peace, of weary acceptance. One by one, they began to fade, dissolving into the gentle light. The young girl paused, looked back at Duke, and offered a small, grateful smile before she too disappeared. The driver remained for a moment longer, bowing his head low in a gesture of profound apology and thanks, before he too vanished into the welcoming radiance. The light faded. The oppressive cold lifted. The silence returned, but it was a natural silence now, filled with the gentle sounds of the forest night. Duke felt light. Exhausted, but free. The haunting weight was gone. He drove away from Shadow Creek Road a changed man. The nightmares stopped. The whispers faded. He never forgot the last ferry or its passengers, but the memory was no longer one of pure terror, but of tragedy, remorse, and eventual, hard-won peace. He became a more cautious driver, always warning younger colleagues about the dangers of the road, both seen and unseen, and the importance of heeding warnings. The legend of the ghost bus persisted, but for those who knew Duke's story, it served as a solemn, meaningful reminder. Every journey has its risks, and some burdens can only be lifted through compassion. Finding peace for the departed often requires intervention from the living, but sometimes the spirits themselves actively seek resolution, their presence disrupting the mortal world until their story is uncovered, as was the case on the treacherous bends of Twin Sisters Fall. Finding peace for the departed often requires intervention from the living, but sometimes the spirits themselves actively seek resolution, their presence disrupting the mortal world until their story is uncovered, as was the case on the treacherous bends of Twin Sisters Fall. An and she were inseparable. Best friends since childhood, they had navigated the bewildering maze of adolescence together in their small mountain village before bravely heading off to university in the capital. Now, after a grueling semester of exams and city noise, they were finally heading home. Laughter echoed around them as they loaded their shared, sputtering motorbike, excitement buzzing in the air. They dreamed of cool mountain breezes, their families cooking, the familiar comfort of home. The journey was long, involving the notoriously winding pass known locally as Twin Sisters Fall, named for two adjacent peaks that seemed to lean towards each other like sorrowful siblings, but they were young, eager, and maybe a little reckless. They set off under a sky that promised a clear afternoon. But the mountains are fickle. Halfway up the ascent of Twin Sisters Fall, the weather turned with terrifying speed. Blue sky vanished, replaced by churning, bruised clouds that unleashed a torrential downpour. Fog, thick as cotton wool, descended, clinging to the road, reducing visibility to mere feet. The asphalt turned slick and treacherous. They should have stopped, waited it out. Any sensible person would have. But the pull of home was strong, the impatience of youth stronger still. Maybe they thought they could outrun it. Maybe they just weren't thinking clearly. Coming into one of the pass's sharpest, blindest curves, a place where the road seemed to shrug itself off the mountainside, the motorbike's worn tire lost its grip. A sickening slide, a panicked cry swallowed by the wind and rain, and then, nothing. The bike, with An and she still clinging to it, vanished over the edge, plunging silently into the deep, densely wooded ravine below. No witnesses. No wreckage visible from the road above. Just the indifferent roar of the storm. Back in the village, and in the capital, days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Initial worry morphed into frantic searching, then into heartbroken resignation. Two bright young women, full of promise, simply vanished. Lost to the vastness of the mountains, swallowed whole. Eventually, life, as it must, moved on, leaving behind an aching void and unanswered questions. They became a sad memory, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the pass. But the pass remembered. Or perhaps, something on the pass remembered. Slowly, insidiously, stories began to surface. Late-night travelers reported strange sensations on that particular stretch of road near the sharp curve, sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, radios crackling with static, the unnerving feeling of being watched from the trees. Then came the sightings. Fleeting glimpses of two young women in pale clothes standing by the roadside, their faces obscured by shadow or rain, only to vanish when approached. Sometimes, drivers heard faint laughter, or perhaps crying, seemingly carried on the wind, echoing eerily between the twin peaks. At first, people dismissed it. Tricks of the light, wind whistling through the rocks, overactive imaginations fueled by the pass's already dangerous reputation. But then the accidents started. Minor at first, a car mysteriously swerving, a tire inexplicably blowing out. But they grew more frequent, more serious. A motorcyclist swore he felt invisible hands grab his handlebars, wrenching him towards the cliff edge before he managed to wrestle back control, crashing painfully but luckily not fatally. Another driver slammed on his brakes, convinced he saw two girls step directly into his path, only to find nothing there, causing a terrifying near miss with the truck behind him. The sightings became more aggressive, the laughter sounding less like sorrow and more like sharp, cold mockery. People spoke of vengeful spirits, angry at being forgotten, lost between worlds on that desolate stretch of haunted road. Twin Sisters Fall became a place to be avoided after dark, its beauty tainted by a growing, pervasive fear. Captain Howe scoffed at the tales. A barrel-chested man whose face was a roadmap of tough years spent hauling timber, Howe had driven Twin Sisters Fall countless times and prided himself on his pragmatism. Ghosts? Nonsense for fools and the faint-hearted. Until one rain-lashed night, much like the one on and she had vanished into, when he was forced to make a late run. He felt the familiar warnings prickle his skin as he approached the notorious curve, but stubbornly ignored them. Just nerves, he told himself, gripping the wheel. Suddenly, his headlights flickered erratically. The temperature in his cab plummeted, his breath misting before him. And through the slashing rain, he saw them. Two figures. Standing right on the fog line at the edge of the road. White shirts clinging wetly to slender frames. Long dark hair plastered across faces he couldn't quite make out. They seemed to raise their hands, as if waving for help. Howe's heart gave a painful lurch, skepticism warring with a sudden, visceral fear. He slowed, peering through the rain-streaked windshield. Were they real? Stranded hikers? He glanced at his passenger side mirror for just a second, and when he looked back at the road, they were gone. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by annoyance at his own jumpiness. See? Just the fog playing tricks. But then he glanced in the rearview mirror. And froze. They were there. In the reflection. Sitting silently in the back of his empty cab, their pale faces inches from his own, eyes like chips of obsidian reflecting the dashboard lights, lips curled into identical, hideous, mocking smiles. A strangled cry escaped Howe's throat. He felt an invisible force dragging at the steering wheel, trying to pull the truck towards the abyss. The air thickened, filled with the scent of wet earth and something cloyingly sweet, like decaying flowers. He stomped on the accelerator, fighting the wheel, the truck groaning in protest. The smiles in the mirror widened. A cold, sibilant whisper seemed to fill the cab, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Stay with us. You'll like it down here, Howe screamed, wrenching the wheel violently the other way. The truck skidded, tires losing purchase, and slammed hard into the rock face on the inside of the curve. Metal shrieked, glass shattered. Before blackness took him, the last thing he saw were those two smiling faces, superimposed over the spiderweb cracks in his windshield, promising an eternity of cold company. News of Captain Howe's crash, and his terrified, rambling account of the Whispering Sisters in his cab, spread through the region, cementing the pass's dark legend. People avoided it almost entirely now. But the story reached Uncle Tam, an old man living quietly in a nearby valley, a man known for his quiet ways and an uncanny sensitivity some called the yin and yang eyes, an ability to perceive the echoes of strong emotions, the lingering presence of troubled spirits. He hadn't known An and she personally, but he felt their unresolved sorrow like a physical ache whenever talk turned to Twin Sisters Fall. He felt their growing anger, their desperate loneliness. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that the accidents wouldn't stop until the girls were found. Until they were brought home. One blustery afternoon, as another storm gathered ominously around the Twin Peaks, Uncle Tam made his decision. He packed a sturdy bag with rope, a powerful flashlight, and some simple offerings, and began the slow trek up the pass. The closer he got to the curve, the stronger the feeling became, a palpable wave of grief, confusion, and icy resentment washing over him. He could almost hear their voices, not mocking now, but thin and lost, whispering on the wind, cold, so lost, find us, home. He stopped his old pickup near the spot where How had crashed, the air heavy and charged. Ignoring the rising wind and spitting rain, he walked to the edge of the precipice. He saw them then, not as solid figures, but as shimmering outlines in the mist below, near the base of the steepest drop. Two translucent shapes, huddled together, radiating an almost unbearable sadness. He felt no fear, only a deep, aching pity. Closing his eyes, he spoke softly into the wind, I hear you, little sisters. You want to go home. I will help you. Show me. Guided by an intuition that transcended sight, he found a treacherous, barely there animal trail leading down into the ravine. The descent was perilous. Rain slicked the rocks, loose scree shifted underfoot, thorny bushes tore at his clothes. He moved slowly, carefully, his flashlight beam probing the dense, dripping undergrowth. Deeper and deeper he went, following that undeniable pull, that sense of sorrowful presence. And then, he found it. Almost completely buried beneath years of accumulated leaves, mud, and tangled vines, the twisted, rusting carcass of a motorbike. Time and the elements had taken their toll, but it was unmistakable. And nestled amongst the wreckage, sheltered partially by the bike's frame, were the pitifully small, scattered remains of two skeletons, bleached white by time and weather. A small, tarnished silver locket lay tangled in the roots near one skull. On and she found at last. Uncle Tam worked for hours in the fading light and persistent rain. Gently, respectfully, he gathered the remains. He couldn't carry them back up the treacherous slope alone, not then. Instead, using his hands and flat stones, he cleared a small space near the wreckage. He arranged the bones with care, placing the locket amongst them. He built a simple cairn of rocks over the spot, a makeshift memorial in the heart of the wild ravine. He lit the incense he'd brought, its fragrant smoke curling strangely upwards despite the damp air, and whispered a promise, you are found. You are remembered. You will go home now. Rest in peace, little sisters. He climbed back up the pass, weary but resolute. The journey back to the village, the heartbreaking task of informing the families, providing them with the locket as proof, it was agonizing. But it brought a necessary, painful closure after years of torturous uncertainty. Soon after, the families, guided by Uncle Tam, made the difficult journey to retrieve the remains properly. On and she were finally laid to rest in consecrated ground, their long, cold vigil over. From that day forward, the strange occurrences on Twin Sisters Fall ceased. The eerie laughter, the phantom sightings, the inexplicable accidents, all stopped. The pass was still dangerous, demanding respect from travelers, but the palpable aura of fear and vengeful sorrow lifted, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. People started using the road again, though many would slow near the infamous curve, perhaps offer a silent prayer or leave a small flower by the roadside where Uncle Tam had first built his cairn. The haunted pass became, once more, just a beautiful, challenging mountain road, its tragic story now a somber memory, a testament to two lost souls finally brought home. The whispers on Twin Sisters Fall finally quieted, replaced by prayers of remembrance, proving that even the most persistent spirits can find peace when their stories are finally heard. From phantom hitchhikers to vengeful residents and spectral convoys, the lonely passes echo with stories born of sorrow and the uncanny. The whispers on Twin Sisters Fall finally quieted, replaced by prayers of remembrance, proving that even the most persistent spirits can find peace when their stories are finally heard. From phantom hitchhikers to vengeful residents and spectral convoys, the lonely passes echo with stories born of sorrow and the uncanny. These narratives, passed down through generations or whispered between wary travelers, serve as chilling reflections of the unique power these remote places hold over the human imagination. Mountain passes, by their very nature, are liminal spaces. They exist on the edges, connecting settled valleys but belonging fully to neither. They are conduits, passages not just for vehicles but perhaps for something else entirely. The profound isolation, the raw, untamed beauty often intertwined with sudden, lethal danger, sharp curves obscuring what lies ahead, unpredictable weather rolling in like a malevolent entity, the sheer distance from aid or comfort, all contribute to an atmosphere where the ordinary feels thin, and the extraordinary seems disturbingly possible. These are environments that strip away the veneer of modern security, reminding travelers of their fundamental vulnerability, their smallness in the face of indifferent nature in the vast, dark unknown. It's in this crucible of solitude and potential peril that the seeds of legend find fertile ground. We've journeyed through several such tales, each unique yet resonant with shared threads of tragedy and the supernatural. We encountered Lean on Serpent's Coil Pass, a solitary phantom forever bound to her final, desperate journey home, an embodiment of unresolved attachment and sorrow made manifest. Then, within the decaying walls of the Watcher's house, we witnessed the terrifying consequence of intrusion and perhaps ancestral guilt, where the weeping shadow, a spirit born of violence and betrayal, sought not just revenge but a chilling continuation of its suffering through replacement. The spectral journey of the last ferry on Shadow Creek Road presented a different kind of haunting, a collective trauma, an entire community of souls trapped in the loop of their fatal accident, their spectral presence a chilling reminder of the driver's remorse and the passenger's interrupted lives, all yearning for release. And finally, the whispering sisters of twin sisters Fall, On and She, whose angry, sorrowful haunting served as a desperate cry across the years, a demand not for vengeance, but simply to be found, acknowledged, and laid to rest. Across these diverse encounters, common themes emerge like trails converging in the mist. The vulnerability of the lone traveler, exposed and far from help, becomes a recurring motif. Unresolved emotions, potent forces like grief, rage, guilt, longing, seem to anchor spirits, preventing them from moving on, their spectral energy bleeding into the physical world. Tragedy, sudden and violent, often serves as the catalyst, shattering lives and leaving behind psychic scars on the landscape itself. These desolate places become repositories for sorrow, the thin veil between life and death seemingly frayed, allowing glimpses, encounters, intrusions. The very air can feel heavy with memory, the silence pregnant with unspoken stories. These enduring legends function, perhaps, as cautionary tales. They remind us to respect these wild, remote environments, to acknowledge the potential dangers, both physical and, some would say, metaphysical. They speak to a deep-seated human need to make sense of the inexplicable, to give form to our fears of death, loss, and the vast unknown that lies beyond the familiar lights of civilization. Whether one believes in literal ghosts or sees these stories purely as products of human psychology, the mind playing tricks under duress, projecting fears onto ambiguous stimuli in isolated settings, their power is undeniable. These chilling reflections persist in folklore, whispered around fires, shared by truckers over late-night coffee, woven into the cultural fabric of the communities nestled below the passes. They speak to something primal within us. Are they merely echoes of past tragedies, amplified by solitude and fear? Or does something truly linger in those high, lonely places when the mist rolls in and the sun dips below the horizon? Do certain locations, steeped in strong emotion or sudden death, retain a kind of psychic residue? The question hangs in the air, as intangible yet persistent as the mountain fog itself. These stories offer no easy answers, only unsettling possibilities. They leave us pondering the boundaries of our reality, the enduring power of memory and emotion, and the secrets that might lie hidden just off the winding mountain roads, waiting in the deep shadows for the next unsuspecting traveler. What other echoes remain unheard in the mist? What other chilling tales do the silent peaks keep?